Without a doubt, the life of a Roman legionary was extremely challenging and required great endurance. Recruits and volunteers frequently lacked certainty over their ability to return home during their period of serving. They were expected to become true men as a result of their responsibilities and discipline, ready to defeat a more powerful foe. But what was generally life like in the military? For a period of 16 years of duty, the legionaries were enlisted between the ages of 17 and 20. The ideal height for a Roman legionary should be 170 centimeters. Taller citizens were allowed to enlist as well, and the minimum height requirement for horsemen, or the first legionary cohorts, was roughly 180 centimeters. Geoffrey Cron's study of 926 adult male bones buried in Italy between 500 BCE and 500 CE revealed that the average height of the population was 168 centimeters. The Roman legionaries had to maintain the alignment in the proper order, therefore, a certain height was given preference. After rigorous training and military drills, the legionaries were made to march 37.5 kilometers a day with luggage weighing as much as 36 kilos. The previously acquired skills of the young recruits were put to good use right away. Those who were once smiths then became armorers, while those who were skilled in woodworking constructed war engines. Shoemakers also made shoes for the soldiers. If someone lacked these skills, he might simply join the surveyor's crew or the group in charge of sweeping the roads. When there were no fights, those were the legionaries' responsibilities. But when the trumpets sounded the call to arms, they were all required to be prepared and equipped at their posts. There was a division into experienced veterans and young ones. The experienced legionaries were telling stories and teaching the others how to behave on the battlefield. The veterans were seated in the middle of the fight, where they could clinch the result of the battle, and the younger soldiers' main aim was simply to immobilize the enemy. Roman legions drank beer or diluted wine, a daily ration of about 0.27 liters. It occasionally happened that drinking more alcohol resulted in certain difficulties. Legionaries were harshly punished for mistakes, thus, they could not let themselves commit any. A sentry who was discovered napping while on duty was either murdered or punished. Thus, the Roman soldiers allegedly devised a special method of sleeping on the watch that involved bracing the entire body against the shield. Additionally, if the soldier in charge of constructing the camp was discovered to be without his gladius, he would be executed. The tribunes and centurions' inspections were largely responsible for the Roman army's strict discipline. The overall evaluation of practice, soldiers' assignments, and inspecting the condition of the weapons were thought to be encouraging. It was a technique for them to efficiently plan their spare time, as well as develop a habit of dependability and responsibility for the property of the military. Many believed that if the rigid regimentation of the past was reinstated in the Roman army, Rome's power would follow. The topic of food is also important to bring up because it was very different back then from what we might envision today. The bread made up a large portion of the legionaries' daily wheat ration, which was about 8.7 liters. They ate very little food that was regarded to be valued, such as meat or vegetables. The Romans' insufficient protein intake was to blame for their slow bone formation, which led to their diminutive stature. The mainstay of the Germanic and Gallic diets was meat. Naturally, this does not imply that the Romans were vegetarians only. Beef, hog, lamb, and game were other options on their menu. Roman troops voluntarily took advantage of the wide range of goods and services offered by shopkeepers, artisans, and prostitutes. A temporary camp was erected around the fort when the soldiers arrived someplace, and it eventually developed into a village or a small town. Soldiers who were inebriated and wandered around occasionally caused trouble. The military clubs, which were in charge of looking after the soldiers, used to host a feast for Roman legionaries on special occasions. Sometimes quite sizable amphitheaters for the gladiator battles were constructed right next to the fortifications. For instance, the auditorium in Carnuntum, Austria, can accommodate a larger audience than the one in Caerleon, Wales, which had a capacity of only 6,000. Surprisingly, baths were also present in Roman camps. The long-distance march was the hardest thing for the recruits to master. Every month, fully armed soldiers had to walk 30 kilometers. They marched for half the distance, then ran for the other. Additionally, they learned how to create a camp and practiced horseback riding, swimming, and stone throwing. Twice a day they exercised, while the veterans only once a day. They also had to learn how to mount and dismount a horse while wearing all of their gear, which was no easy accomplishment given the lack of stirrups at the time. The ability to employ the weapon, though, was the most crucial of all. The stake, which was roughly a person's height, was firmly planted in the ground. The soldier assaulted the stake while carrying a wooden dull sword, considerably heavier than a regular one. He also had to hurl a pilum and take part in mock fights, where the weapons were shielded by cases to prevent any possible harm. Once trained by completing a 4-month grueling period, it is now time to confront the enemy. Soldiers are positioned in battle formation, possibly 10 ranks or deeper, ideally on level, open terrain. In order for individual units to move more readily, there are gaps in the line. The centurion is positioned far to the right in the first rank, and the flag bearers will advance in front of the line and lead into battle. When the soldiers are around 30 yards or just under 30 meters from the adversary, they are given the command to charge. First, they hurl their pilum, then they ram the enemy at speed, trying to grind the boss of their shields into his belly or groin. Stones, projectiles like stones, arrows, spears, and maybe catapulted balls are flying all around, and eventually the adversary flees. The legionnaires capture the enemies, rob their camp, and grab all the goods from the deceased. With the loot they have gathered from the dead, particularly their armor and weapons, the Romans erected a trophy. There are doctors or medics who can take care of those injured. Since there are no antibiotics, wounds frequently result in death. A soldier will receive an honorable discharge, just like all other veterans, if he is determined to be unfit for service. Also, you won't be required to carry out any civic obligations or pay taxes as a result. The legionaries were barred from getting married during the reign of Augustus in order to maintain discipline and prevent the soldiers from becoming too attached to their base of operations. The legislation was supposed to be in effect for the following 2 centuries, but given that the legionaries' service lasted 25 years, it was unreasonable to expect them to forego marriage and parenthood. Most soldiers married local women, since their residence was connected to the military unit they were serving in. The army was aware of their relationship, but the nation was not. A legionary was regarded as a desirable man by the women since he possessed a reliable source of income and stability. Children from these unions frequently upheld family customs and enlisted in the military, which wasn't pointless during the army's recruitment crisis. Boys who wanted to serve in the military joined their dad's units. The legionaries maintained contact with their families by writing to them and sending them letters and packages. The troops sneaking out to visit their family who lived outside the fort were given a wink by the officers. Additionally, it occasionally happened that a cohabitant moved into the camp with children in order to share contubernum with her spouse. There is proof of this in certain everyday items discovered in the barracks. The legions were seen as a group of soldier citizens favored with service because of their natural abilities, developed by training. Those people let the rest of the citizens devote themselves to their professions. Thus, they were not soldiers out of necessity. As a result of forming a professional army, many citizens could devote themselves entirely to their professions and therefore probably enjoyed being released from their military duty. Of course, it did not interfere with them grieving in public for the old Roman morality and mentality. The Roman legionary, depending on circumstances, filled with either respect and admiration or fear and contempt. This brings us to the end of this video. If you liked the video, please consider subscribing and sharing so we can keep bringing more content like this. Also, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time.